Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Coroner. So in this episode, a very, tragic and sad episode where the case involves a shooting at a church. And obviously it's a situation of, well, was this, was this racially motivated? Was it terrorism? Like, what was the reasoning behind this? And obviously it's the whole process behind, when dealing with multiple bodies, they have to keep things separate because they don't want to, cross-contaminate anything. They just, and obviously it's, the whole thing of also trying to figure out, identify everybody, the whole sad situation of people's phones are ringing on their bodies because their family members are trying to, call them and whatever, and it's just, that, how heart-wrenching that can be. Obviously, it hits River too because she's it's like you see too many brown faces, I think with this particular job. And then later on when she finds out one of those bodies was of a boy who was just a kid himself, because I think that adds to it. Not only is it someone, you see yourself, but it's also this is someone who's so young, who had their entire life in front of them. But also the fact of the matter is you find out this person's got all these bruises and stuff. There's you can look at their arm and see these bruises. They never go into it, but they look like cigarette burns, and just broken bones that have kind of healed and stuff like that. But you can tell that this kid was abused, and now it's because at first they were thinking about the trajectory of everything, maybe it was that priest, and so immediately they think it, and you start thinking so was it someone that was abused by a priest coming back to get revenge, but it turns out that's not the case, because the priest in particular wasn't necessarily shot. It was actually wood shrapnel that was in it. So it's like a literal stake to the heart. It's because one of the bullets hit some wood thing in the line of trajectory, and it ended up piercing the dude's and it ended up piercing the dude's chest. So that's how he wasn't the intended target, because obviously it's a situation there was firing back and forth, someone was shooting this way, and then someone else got because the person, we end up finding out later on his name, Ernest, but everyone called him Ernie, was aiming at one direction but then was receiving fire from another. I also thought it was pretty powerful and nice, the whole Allison connection, because immediately, she could tell, the way he was sitting there, obviously he was nervous, it affected him, so she took time to kind of talk to him, and she's I understand, having, I can't fully understand what you're going through, but she's she talks about when I lost my mom when I was a little bit older than you, and honestly, she's I was angry, I was sad, I didn't want to talk to anybody, so she's I drew instead. So she gives him, paper to draw. It kind of, because I think for Allison, obviously when she, much with the River, when she looks at, when she looks at him, Enos, she kind of sees, I think herself too, because obviously it's just especially later on when she explains it to Jenny, why she got into why she wanted to work at a coroner's office in the first place. It's because of her mom's situation, because she actually goes in on it and explains her mom died. It's her mom, there was no cereal, so her mom went to the store a million times, and just that night she didn't come back. They got the police came to her at midnight and were saying there was an accident, maybe she had slipped in the rain and stuff and cracked her head. But it's Jenny was but you don't think that's what happened? I was immediately thinking is there more to this case, your mom's situation, and it was unsolved or something? Maybe it still is, because the way she's talking about it. So it's probably that thing of she wanted to kind of probably be in a business where, because the whole thing is also, and it's something, Jenny always says, is they speak for the dead, she's, always says to them, I see you. And I think in this particular instance, I think it's that thing of, Allison wanting to get justice for her mom, because she says that her mom had a bruised face and a split lip. It's okay, if she'd fallen and cracked her head, that's one thing, but how did she fall and crack her head and also have bruises? It's but for her, it's she feels her mom was treated differently, because all they saw was a native, and they didn't want to look beyond that. They didn't care enough. It's if my mom was white, it'd be different, but because she, so I think that injustice in her eyes, it's she wanted to be in a position where she would, who's to say, because they didn't really go into it, but maybe they did eventually find the person who did that to her mom. Like I said, she never really goes into it, but more so than anything, working there is to make sure that no one ever goes through what her and her family went through, and I think obviously it's a different circumstances, but I think, speaking for the dad, obviously it's like, it's kind of what Allison is doing, but it's also, obviously what Jenny does a little too. So I think Jenny can understand that, it's like how, a loss can shape you, obviously like losing her husband, like how, that, shaped her. And obviously like, obviously what she's remembering now about her, the whole Katie situation, I think obviously that's starting to shape and change her as well, So I just thought that was kind of a nice element of bringing, Enos and Allison together like that. Because she's like, oh, I think it's actually, there was a reason we were brought together, Because she's actually the one that figured out the shooter, the language she was speaking. Obviously, she's like basically was able to translate it, being like, oh yeah, it's because I'm not gonna say the language because like I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of it, so I'm not even gonna try. But essentially, it was basically don't look up, and so it's like Enos knew the shooter, and obviously she was telling Jenny, I'm not telling you not to go at Enos to get answers. I'm just saying, we don't know what he's been through before now. But obviously Allison ends up talking to him in their language, and it's like, oh, like where'd you learn it? And it's like my mom, and eventually later on, Allison talks about the fact that she learned it from her mom as well. I also thought it was kind of neat. I always keep blanking. I think it's Sabina being there for her. It's like, it's like, I want you to know I love you and our baby loves you. Your baby loves you. I was about to say our baby. They're a thing, but still, like, that's, more so Allison. But it's like, her being there for her, it kind of makes sure she's okay. Like, it's kind of nice to have people, especially on a day like that. I think with the, the case that they're working on, I think it's nice to have someone in your corner like that, I thought that was kind of nice. And I'm sure Allison's situation probably is going to shape how she handles, like, being a mom herself. Because we even see at the end, she was speaking, she's like, oh, this is a beret. She was saying it in her language. So I think that was kind of pretty dope. I think it's just kind of like her mom taught her, she's teaching her child. I thought that was just kind of beautiful. Like, it's almost coming full circle in that regard. I thought that was kind of nice. But basically, the sad, revealed to this whole situation is that the shooter is Enos's older brother, Ernest. And the reason why he did it was because he was going after Kent. Because Kent and Darla, his foster parents, were abusing him. And him and his brother got the gun to protect them, Because it's like, yeah, like, that's the one thing he wouldn't be able to punch. Their foster dad, Kent, wouldn't be able to punch is a gun. And obviously it's like, yeah, Darla might have never laid a hand on any of them, but she didn't do anything to stop her husband's abuse, so she's just, just as guilty. So they're trying to make it so that she can't ever foster kids again. So you knew what was going on, and and that's always a tough situation too, because it's like, but it's like, was it clear that something was happening to her too? You never know with that situation, but it's still a thing of, so much death happened because of what your husband did, and it's like, this wasn't what, because even Enos is like, I know I'm not, in no shape or form is it good what, it's still bad what, Ernie did, but it's still that thing of like, he was just trying to protect me and him, like he was trying to look after us, but with the situation all said and done, Allison saying like, hey, like, you'll get a visit with your aunt and your cousins, and if things work out, you'll be living with them. And he even drew that nice picture of him and Allison, and I thought that was she's like, oh, this is beautiful, Enos. And I thought, part of me was hoping, I mean, it still could be a possibility. I hope that she's able to kind of check in with him every once in a while, be able to kind of stop in, and they're able to talk and hang out. I hope that is a byproduct of this whole situation. They don't really go into it, but I'd like that to be a byproduct of it. Another complicated aspect to this episode is obviously Jenny still dealing with the sleepwalking situation. Obviously, she burned something on the stove, like early in the episode, and she just, obviously, like, it's, again, Liam and Ross find her in this, complicated situation again, and so it's a thing of like, Jenny, we need to, because like Ross was like, me and Mateo are supposed to go to a concert, but we'll stay. She's like, no, you go to the concert. And Liam's like, Jenny, we need to, do something about this. But she's like, she's so busy trying to like dive into work, because I think she's like, if as long as I'm working, I'm doing something, and it's just like, I think it's just I need to keep my mind preoccupied as long as I'm working. But then like partway through work, you see that she falls asleep, and then like one of the bodies, like she goes into the room and the body wakes up and it's like, oh, help me. And she's like, no, come on, Jenny, come on. And you're like, she's asleep. And then we see a scene of her sleepwalking. She walked somewhere and then she came back, and then she wakes up and she's like, she doesn't know what happened. But I'm like, she did something. Now the question is, what did she do? And we end up finding out later on what it was. She went in there, took that gun out of the gun that was evidence. She took it out of the safe and put it in her drawer. What could she have done? Who knows in the long run? But now it's the thing for Jenny. It's like, it's already bad enough already getting the looks from Ross and Liam, and also just her doing this stuff that could get her or someone else hurt. But now it's like, it's not just at home. It's affecting her work, because obviously she's not getting enough sleep. But also, like, who knows what she was going to do with that? Like, why she did that? Her subconscious is trying to tell her something. It's sad that like unmasking all this truth, all this trauma, like sent her spiraling. But like I said, her mind is trying to tell her something that maybe she's not quite ready to face. But there's definitely something there. I mean, maybe it's not just a trauma thing. Maybe it's just something. Maybe it is legitimate, like something neurological. But whatever the case may be, and Donovan, shows her that she's like, no, he's like, because before he was like, oh, not getting enough sleep or insomnia. She's like, it's something like that. But now it's like, so this whole thing is sleepwalking, and she's like, I promise you, I can fix this. Like, but that's the thing. Like, she keeps trying to say, like, no, I can fix this. I'm going to fix this. But that's the thing. I think Jenny's kind of going at this alone rather than kind of, letting other people really help her. But we see at the end of the episode, she has Liam taking her to like a sleep study thing, or so they can study and monitor her and see like what's going on, and be able to figure out what this whole thing is. So that's kind of a complicated nature of this whole thing, which is actually sad, because Liam was fixing her like this whole dinner and stuff, but then like everyone rolls over it. It's like, oh, Mateo and Ross, and it's like, no, this is for your mom. It's like, yeah, and he's like, no, there's gonna be, Ross is like, no, there's gonna be plenty left over, and Gordon's like, oh, you were gonna fix it, oh yeah, no, oh, it's so good that Jenny keeps you around, and they all kind of snacking, and Jenny's like, oh, I'm so sorry. He's like, no, it's cool, don't worry about it, still that whole situation with Liam too, where it's like he starts like the dryer and he leans his head against it, because I think for him it's like, once again, it's just like he needs the noise. Like, once again, it's like him and Jenny are actually kind of going through similar things in a certain regard. They're both people, I think, plagued by trauma, and it's just finding their own ways to kind of deal with it. Because obviously there's also the Kelly thing too, because obviously she comes over. Because even Gordon was like, why are you reinforcing, like, what do you reinforce? He's like, I'm reinforcing this just to, be sure. But it's like, Liam needs busy work. I think he needs the noise. So I think that's another reason why he's working so hard. But I think he needs a project to keep him focused. He needs the noise to kind of block out, maybe the voices in his head, or just, just to keep any stuff that he's trying to avoid from bubbling to the surface, I think. But, when it's all said and done, though, there's a whole Kelly thing. Obviously, they get introduced and everything. And even at one point, he, much like Jenny calling her Katie last episode, he calls her Katie. And it's just, she kind of doesn't say much. But once again, this whole, I'm weary of this whole Kelly thing. Like I brought up my concerns last episode, that it just seems like she's kind of implanting herself in Jenny's life. Because she's like, Jenny, I kind of took me in. And even Liam's like, yeah, she kind of, because obviously it's like, oh, I heard you were in the military. He's like, yeah. And he's like, I heard about what happened to your family. And it's like, yeah, Jenny was there for me. And he's like, yeah, I'm kind of starting to get to the point I might be thinking that she's taking in strays and stuff like that. But then she kind of goes over to Liam, and I was immediately kind of like, oh, this is don't tell me this is going to turn into a whole like an affair situation, because this seemed like you two are about to start making out type of situation. But then she gets close, she's like, yeah, if you want to, I can be there for you too. And she touches him, and I'm like, oh, this is, and he's like, yeah, and he kind of walks away and he leaves, and she's just smiling and everything. I'm like, this is weird. I don't know whether that's just her just being super friendly, and I don't know. Like I said, the whole Kelly thing just rubs me the wrong way. Like, it just seems like that's going to take a darker turn than I think we're expecting it to. I wasn't expecting that with her story. Like I said, I think it's just because of what's missing in her life right now. She's kind of latched onto Jenny and almost borderline became obsessed with her life. Almost like, part of me wonders, is she trying to make, it's like, is that like, oh my God, we should be together type of situation, or is she actually trying to become, like, I don't know what she's trying to do. Like, first she got close to Ross, now Gordon, and trying to be there for Gordon, and also I'm like, oh, I'm trying to be there for you. I mean, to be fair, maybe she's just being helpful. Like I said, I'm reading too much into it, but it just don't sit right, you know? So I'm curious to see what ends up, you know, being the byproduct of that. That's going to be interesting to see how that story continues to develop. Because I think, it's kind of spoilers, but I know like the final episode of this season is called, the season finale of this season is called Fire 2. So it's like a continuation of, so I'm assuming like that story, her storyline and everything's going to come full circle. I think in that regard, we'll ultimately have to, you know, see. Now that I'm thinking about in retrospect, the gun, the fire, digging stuff up, it's all connected to this case. So maybe there's more to it that her brain is like, it's her own trauma, but also her brain is trying to tell her like something's off about this. And maybe that's why that kind of comes full circle. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe this is, because like when you actually think about it, you know, everything she's doing, digging in the dirt, all the fires, the gun, it's all things that are elements to that case from the first episode, the building fire and everything. So I don't know. Once again, maybe me reading too much into it, but I'm curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.